Okay, hello again, and we are going to continue talking about broadcast writing here, and I think this may be about as far as we go with broadcast writing, but there's still some important uh, things to talk about, and in particular, writing to sound bites. Thanks to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire for these examples. The thing we want to avoid most of all with writing to sound bites within a story that is radio or TV or audio or video story is redundancy. We don't want to say the same thing in our lead in to the soundbite, explaining what the soundbite is about, as what is then said in the soundbite. And this is trickier than you might think. So some examples here. Here's the good example of what we're trying to avoid. Packers head coach Mike McCarthy says it was a big win. And then the soundbite begins, it was a big win. We needed this to get back on track because it's hard in this league to come back after losing two in a row. So we say in the lead-in, it was a big win. And then the soundbite begins and he says it was a big win. And that's what we're trying to avoid. By the way, I understand that it's ironic that Mike McCarthy later became the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, but at this time he was the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. So what would be better? We change our lead-in where we say it was a big win to something else. And so it goes, Packers head coach Mike McCarthy says this game was important. And then the soundbite begins, it was a big win. We needed this to get back on track. So we change our words, it was a big win, to this game was important. And then his words are not redundant with ours. Granted, they more or less say the same thing, but they're not exactly the same. Now, a better way to do that is this, and I don't think I've ever read this anywhere else. This occurred to me after having done all this work for several years. Take what he said and put it into your lead-in. Borrow what he said. Put it into your lead-in. So the lead-in would be the same as the first one that we looked at, but then we edit that part out of the soundbite, and we start the soundbite just slightly later than we would have otherwise. So our lead-in then reads, Packers head coach Mike McCarthy says it was a big win. And the soundbite begins, we needed this to get back on track. So we've borrowed his words, it was a big win. We've put that into our lead-in, and then we start the soundbite basically with the second thing that he said. We needed this to get back on track. And then what we write and what we say in our lead-in and what he then says in the soundbite fit perfectly. That's one of the best ways to do it. You never want to say, Packers head coach Mike McCarthy had this to say, and then the soundbite. Yes, you will hear that some. The problem with that is it's sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. Once you start doing that, you tend to write all of your lead-ins to sound bites that way. They all sound the same. It's a bit lazy, not very interesting, and so don't do it, or certainly try to avoid doing it. Another way to think about it is the lead-in ought to make sense in and of itself. So if you say Packers head coach Mike McCarthy says it was a big win, even without the soundbite, that makes sense. Or if you say Packers head coach Mike McCarthy says this game was important, that makes sense, even if the soundbite somehow did not play. But if you say Packers head coach Mike McCarthy had this to say, that doesn't make sense within the story. It has to have the soundbite for it to make sense. So we want the lead-in to make sense in and of itself, apart from the soundbite, if possible. So here's a story from the Texas State Network, and this is an organization that I have worked for a long time, a very long-standing and well-respected organization. One of their stories, and it has a soundbite in it. And I'll point out some other things in this that also apply to broadcast writing. But it goes like this. Fort Worth police have started a mentorship program where kids will be matched up with officers to help them with their education and to build life skills. Operation Progress started in Los Angeles, and the group's Maisha Smith says the program builds relationships between kids and police, can help kids focus on their education, and try to build more family engagement.
All of those pieces are intertwined. So we have our police officers that are assisting their mentees with math work. We have our police officers that are taking their mentees back to school shops.
She says, it's hard to hear, but she says school shopping is the last thing she says, and that's the out cue. The out cue is the last words that the person speaks in the soundbite. And then the story continues, usually one line after the soundbite. Fort Worth police say the program can help kids develop social skills so they can become leaders in their neighborhoods. But the lead-in to the soundbite does not repeat what she says in the soundbite. And that's because we wrote it that way. We made sure that it doesn't repeat what she says in the soundbite. So, again, the lead-in goes, the group's Maisha Smith says the program builds relationships between kids and police, can help kids focus on their education, and try to build more family engagement. And then what she says adds to that.
All of those pieces are intertwined. So we have our police officers that are assisting their mentees with math work. We have our police officers that are taking their mentees back to school shops.
Okay, so that's a pretty good example. We use says for attribution in this story, not said. So present tense, says. And Fort Worth police say, again, not said. So you do see attribution here. Who says so? Maisha Smith of Operation Progress says so. Fort Worth police say. That's attribution. But we use present tense. You see this is in uppercase, which is typical for radio writing in particular. It's 3 sentences in this story, so rather brief, but just covers the most essential aspects of the story. Here's another one, also from the Texas State Network. No, it's not your imagination. The 2020 hurricane season has been a busy one. The latest storm, Hurricane Delta, could now impact parts of East Texas. State climatologist John Nielsen-Gammon says the fact that we're already past named storms and are into Greek letters shows a lot.
We're only 2 named storms away from the record we set in the 2005 tropical cyclone season, which included such storms as Katrina.
Named storms, in the during hurricane season, they'll be named Hurricane John, Hurricane Bill, Hurricane Mary, and so on. Well, they ran out of names, so they have to start using Greek letters. So that was an indication of the fact that there have been a lot of hurricanes. But the lead-in here, state climatologist John Nielsen-Gammon says, present tense says, the fact that we're already past named storms and are into Greek letters shows a lot. Now again, his soundbite then adds to what we just had to say.
We're only 2 named storms away from the record we set in the 2005 tropical cyclone season, which included such storms as Katrina.
He does not repeat what we said in our lead-in, and of course he doesn't know that, and he's not involved in the presentation of this story. So it is that we don't say in our lead-in what he says in the soundbite. He adds to what we have already said, and fills out the information that then will be contained in the story. And then continuation, the tag it's called. So far there have been a total of 25 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes, including Delta. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with writing to sound bites, whether it's radio, television, it would be no different for television, audio or video. Attribution, we were just talking about it a moment ago. This really would apply to any sort of media writing that you do, not just broadcast writing, but it's valuable to know this. Use attribution when a statement is opinionated, someone expresses an opinion. It is questionable, someone might dispute what was said. It is controversial, which is similar, and when attribution would better establish the credibility, the believability of the statement. Because remember, attribution is who says so. Attribution is not necessary to use when the statement is a known and indisputable fact. So examples of when attribution is not needed. The Texas State Legislature meets every 2 years. That's well established. That's been true for approaching 200 years. And any place you want to look that up, you will find that that is true. Nobody's going to dispute that. That's a well-established fact. Texas A&M University Commerce is a member of the Lone Star Conference. Look it up anywhere you want to look it up, and you'll find that that is so. Nobody's going to question it. There's no need to attribute it. If someone says in a speech or whatever, Texas A&M University Commerce is a member of the Lone Star Conference, you don't have to say who says so, because it's a well-established fact. World War II ended in 1945. There's no dispute about that. Any place you want to read something about World War II, they'll tell you that. An example of when attribution is needed, more than one example. Most college students party too much. Oh, really? Do you believe that? What's party too much? What's too much? Who says so? See? Because you might very strongly disagree with that. And whether college students party too much or not is a very hard thing to establish. It depends on someone's point of view. So you might say, Dean George Bailey says most college students party too much. So it's important for something like that we indicate who says so. Otherwise, it's as if we're reporting that as a fact when it certainly is not a fact. Whether it's true or not depends on a lot of different factors, but mostly it's an opinion. The oil companies are ripping off the public. Same thing. In some cases that might be true, but again, what is ripping off? That's a rather imprecise term. Some people will disagree, and they will explain that the oil companies know they're not ripping off the public. So it might be Congressman George Bailey says the oil companies are ripping off the public. It's important to indicate who says so, because that's a particular thing that might be true, might not be true. Mostly it's just a matter of opinion. Depends on the point of view. Pilot error caused the plane crash. You as a reporter would have no way of knowing that. That probably comes from some kind of investigation, some kind of report. So you might say the National what is it? Can't think of the name of the organization. We'll just say the National Transportation Safety Board says pilot error caused the plane crash. So you attribute it to a report or to an organization that has investigated the plane crash. You have no particular knowledge of that. You have no way of knowing what caused the plane crash. All you know is what it says in a report. Broadcast writing puts attribution at the beginning of the sentences for better flow, which is what I was doing just now as I was giving you those examples. So in the newspaper example here, and I don't want to read this word for word, it's too tedious. I'll pick it up on the third line. With the oncoming pickup truck, comma, Commerce Police Department Public Information Officer David M. Cohen reported. The attribution is at the end. That's a print-style, newspaper-style sentence. Broadcast example with the attribution at the beginning, Commerce Police spokesman David Cohen says Senate lost control of his motorcycle. The attribution is at the beginning, Commerce Police spokesman David Cohen says. Also that long job title, Commerce Police Department Public Information Officer has been simplified to just Commerce Police Spokesman. We're a bit more informal in broadcast writing. The middle initial is not used unless we think there's a very good reason. Is there another David Cohen who might be confused with this particular David Cohen? If so, maybe we need to say David M. Cohen, but probably not. Okay, but attribution at the beginning of the sentence for broadcast writing. Long newspaper-style sentences should be broken up into smaller sentences. So I'm not going to read this word for word. Look at the first block of copy there by that bulleted item, the first bullet, and that's 4 lines in one sentence. And then down below, the third bullet at the bottom of the page is 3 sentences. So we've taken one sentence and broken it into 3 sentences. And that's a good thing to do for broadcast writing. Really, it's a good thing to do for almost all writing, is to take longer, and you don't want every sentence to be short so that it reads like a first grade reader. But very often we let our sentences get too complicated, unwieldy. The reader has forgotten, how the thing started by the time the reader gets to the end of the sentence. But certainly for broadcast writing, the shorter sentences are a better way to go. I think we'll leave it at that. And there's some more information I might cover with you at some other time, but for the time being, we will leave it at that. And next time we talk, we'll be getting into some other things having to do with media writing. So thanks, and we'll see you then.